you have any questions? Let's just think about, analyze, contemplate these ideas, continue so we can develop amazing potential. So we can help others, okay? Ask you some questions. Questions. Yes, Chrissy.
Yesterday, Venerable, you mentioned that attachment's part of the wisdom way. And I don't know why I've always thought of it as being part of the method and compassion way. Could you just explain to me why?
Say that question differently. It didn't make sense. Say it differently. What do you mean?
So yesterday you'd mentioned attachment is part of...
You mean giving up attachment, learning about attachment?
Giving up attachment as part of the wisdom side. And I've always thought of ignorance as being like the wisdom side. But you mentioned it being attachment or giving up attachment. So why
now I understand why.
Now
I understand why you're saying ignorance. Okay. So if you look at the Lam Rim, do you accept that you learn about the mind in the middle scope?
Yes.
And that before that is karma?
Yeah.
And that's the wisdom wing. All that's the wisdom wing. So if you were to sit down, it's conventional wisdom. So final wisdom, of course, ultimate wisdom is when you get to the final stages and you then look at marikpa, the root delusion, ignorance, and that's when you conquer that. But that's the final step. So if you were on the Hinayana path, which is the first two stages, right, you wouldn't go to the Mahayana path. You wouldn't go to the compassion wing, would you? You'd do all the first stages, impermanence, karma, then you go to the middle scope, you get rid of delusions, you look at the Four Noble Truths, you understand attachment, you see the disgustingness of attachment, you'd give it up, and then you'd get concentration, and then you get emptiness, and then you're out. That's all the wisdom wing. Are you hearing that?
Yeah.
So that's conventional. I mean, because attachment, okay, the three root delusions, the three poisons, right? The root one is ignorance. The next one is attachment. The next one is anger, and then all the other 83,997 that Buddha talks about. They're all the neurotic state of mind that are the cause of suffering, and by removing those, you get wisdom. You can't just remove ignorance. You've got to remove all the branch delusions first. They're the voices of ignorance. Then finally you come to ignorance as the last stages. So it's true on the Lam Rim, the last stage is wisdom, the wisdom of realizing emptiness. That's the ultimate wisdom. But actually where it belongs is in the middle scope. Emptiness is not a Mahayana teaching. On the Theravadan path, that's where it fits. But for Tsongkhapa, I suppose all the other traditions as well, Geshe-la, is that true? That all the Kargyupas and the Nyingmapas also put Shine and Laktong in the six perfections, right? They all do that.
I think so. Yeah.
So in that sense, even though concentration and insight, they're the end result. They're the final stages of the compassion wing, aren't they? But in their character, they are wisdom teachings. In their character, they're part of the first stages of practice. They're actually not Mahayana in their nature. They're Hinayana. I mean, a Hinayana Arhat has to have concentration, and a Hinayana Arhat has to have wisdom, which is concentration and emptiness. So they actually belong there in their character, but they're put at the final stages on the Lam Rim stage. All the Tibetans put them there as part of the six perfections. Are you communicating? Okay, that's clear.
Yeah.
Okay, good. What else, people? Nothing? Everything's clear? Tonglen, taking the shit, eating the vomit, eating other people's garbage, taking the blame. You ready for that? Okay, no questions then. So what do we do next then? Where should we go now? Okay, maybe let's just look at how in our day-to-day lives attachment makes a mess of our compassion. Or put it this way, why in our day-to-day lives our compassion is limited. Or even another one, why when we have compassion for others, when we see the suffering of the world, why we get upset. Do you understand me? That's very typical, isn't it? We get angry or we get depressed. Would you agree with that? You see the world, the suffering, the wars and the violence. So we get upset. And then, of course, the natural thing we conclude is, I'm suffering because I have compassion. Do you hear that one? That's huge in our culture. We all assume if we have a big heart and we see the suffering of the world, we suffer because we have a big heart. Wrong. Let's get clear, okay? So, okay, first of all, put it this way. Compassion or love, they're virtues. They're virtuous states of mind. So that what that means is they're not delusional. They're not neurotic. They're not painful. They're not misconceptions. They're not disturbing. They're not afflictions. All those words are characteristics of the other parts of the mind, attachment and anger, and of course the root one, maripa, self-grasping. Do you understand my point here? That's the character of all the neurotic states of mind. And in their nature, they are painful. And in their nature, they cause suffering because they're misconceptions. Okay, so virtues, relatively speaking, are not misconceptions. I mean, they are finally, because they haven't realized emptiness yet, but in general, they're valid cognitions. They're valid. So what makes something a valid cognition? It sounds a weird thing to us. Valid, you know? It's in touch with reality. So I think the simple way to talk about that, when you've got strong attachment for somebody, just attachment, it exaggerates their beauty, it exaggerates their good qualities, and it's for you, it's coming from this emotional hunger, this neediness, this feeling of not being enough, not having enough. You feel like you're empty and you've got to have a person in your life, and then it exaggerates their deliciousness, and now you feel, I found happiness, I found a purpose, and now I'm happy, you know? It's all distorted and exaggerating. At the same time, you have love and compassion for that person. At the same time, you have love, may you be happy, and you have compassion, may you not suffer. So in a relationship, ordinary with your boyfriend, with your husband, with your child, this is the point. When we understand Buddha's view, delusions cause you suffering, and they cause you to harm others. Virtues cause you happiness, and they cause you to help others. Speaking simply. So therefore, if you have love and compassion, they can't cause you suffering. And I'm being quite literal. They can't cause you suffering. They can't cause suffering. That's not their character. Because why? They're valid cognitions. This sounds very strange. Valid meaning, I suppose valid here meaning they're related. They're not finally yet valid because you haven't realized emptiness. There's still a feeling of, I have compassion for inherent you, and I have love for, I have inherent compassion for inherent you. I have inherent love for inherent you. There's still the fundamental mistake is there, but relatively, conventionally, they are reasonable states of mind. Why? Because they're linked, they're kind of based independent arising. When you have only attachment, it's all me completely. It's all completely isolated me. It's completely caught up in me, completely caught up in this concreteness, this absolute, concrete, separate feeling. But if you have compassion, there's a sense of connectedness to others, isn't there? It's a simple way to put it. You're kind of feeling connected to others. You're relating to others. So there's a validity about that because it's kind of reasonable. Others and me both exist, and compassion reaches out to others, and you see others relatively clearly. You see the suffering, you see their pain, and your heart goes out, oh my God, look at that suffering. So now, why do we suffer when we see that? Compassion in itself is a virtue. Therefore, compassion in itself cannot cause you suffering. So why do you suffer when you have compassion? Because you have attachment. And what is the attachment here? It's not you suffer because your husband has attachment. No, you suffer because your child is suffering. Let's say you have compassion, your child is suffering. And you become tortured by it, you're obsessed by it, you're so unhappy, my poor child, but you're not suffering because you have compassion. It's because your attachment, you see, attachment, the bottom line of attachment, the most fundamental kind of way of describing it, it's craving, it can only cope with everything being lovely. You talk about attachment to sex, attachment to drugs, attachment to alcohol, attachment to being praised, attachment to good reputation, attachment to comfort. But the most simple way of putting attachment is it just wants everything to be nice. Can you hear that? It just wants everything to be lovely. So if you've got no headache, you feel lovely. There's no knee pain, you feel nice. Hubby's being friendly, you feel comfortable. The bed is comfortable, you're comfortable. The weather's nice, you feel comfortable. So attachment's getting what it wants. Now, the moment your child starts screaming and yelling and they have anger and fears and their problems, or they've got terrible headache, or they're sick, your heart reaches out. You can't bear the pain for your poor child. But the reason you suffer, and therefore the reason your compassion is not so effective, because your attachment can't cope with it. Attachment just can't cope with problems. You've got to understand that. It's sort of like, that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is, oh my God, look at the problems. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Or, oh my God, we haven't got enough money. Or you worry about the past, you worry about the future, because attachment is like getting scared. Just think like that. So attachment can't cope. So attachment pollutes your compassion. Your attachment pollutes the compassion. Do you understand that point? It makes you nervous and freaked out. Compassion, if you're a bodhisattva and you only have compassion but no attachment, you'd be as steady as a rock and you wouldn't be afraid. And you only want to help, and you are able to see it in the eye. You're not afraid, and you have enormous courage, But attachment makes us weak. Attachment makes us scared. Attachment makes us angry. Attachment gets us to be upset or depressed. And attachment makes us to panic, because all it wants is everything to be lovely. Can you kind of hear that? So now look at the world when you see wars and suffering and all this pain of the world, countries having crazy experiences, all the poor people, or your children, same thing. It's the worry and the fears and the anger and the hurt and all that stuff. That's what causes us suffering. And of course, in our psychological model in the world, we think that's natural. And what we mean by natural is that you'd be unnatural if you didn't have it. You'd be unnatural if you didn't have anxiety. You'd be unnatural because we think if you didn't have anxiety, oh, you don't care, We really misunderstand that. But this is not the way we think in the West. You've got to really analyze this carefully. But it's very hard to see the difference in the mind. Because until we're highly advanced, we're going to have attachment. But we have to practice on making it less, That's what the practice. That's why the first stages of practice, first control your body and your speech. And don't shout and yell as soon as your attachment doesn't get what it wants. Be controlled. And that's what also means by wisdom. When you're overwhelmed by attachment and aversion, you've got no wisdom at all. You can't see anything past your own nose, Do you see my point? So really, that's what causes our distress. That's what causes anxiety, depression. All of this is coming from attachment and aversion. And that's what messes up. You can't see things clearly. Your compassion is there, but it's like painful. But it's attachment that causes suffering, not compassion. We've got to know that intellectually, Yeah, do you understand that? That's why you can't leap into compassion before you've got some control over attachment. It's impossible. You can't go there. It's too intense. It's too advanced. You only grow slowly, So you could argue the more you get rid of attachment and aversion, naturally your heart opens to others automatically, because attachment and aversion cut you off from others. They cut you off from others. So as you lessen attachment and aversion, the natural result is you connect to others more. And then in the bodhisattva path, you proactively work on growing the compassion, This is not the Western model at all. We can kind of see the truth of it, though. So in other words, there's your child having a tantrum. And they're suffering. Their mind's crazy, they're out of control, You know that. They're causing themselves terrible suffering. But because your attachment freaks out, and then your anger comes. Let's say you get angry, and then you shout and scream and yell, or you get anxious. That's what causes you pain, not the compassion. And then it blocks your compassion. It blocks your compassion, You've got to understand this. And this is again only coming from understanding the way Buddhism describes these states of mind in terms of delusions and all that stuff, This is not the model of the West. Of course, it's advanced. If you're a mother, God, it's so advanced to have compassion that's not polluted by attachment and anxiety and aversion and fears, And this is the other point about the word fear. It's so strange. In Buddhist psychology, the only time you hear about fear, well, no, okay, no. First of all, they talk about the fears of samsara. We don't use those words. But that's all Buddha's saying is, to the degree that you're caught up in ignorance, which is the main one, the root one, then attachment and aversion and jealousy and depression, they are the fears of samsara. Fear, anxiety is another word for fear. Let's face it. And if you look at it, we talk about worries and anxiety, and it's normal for all human beings to have worries and anxiety. You know, you mightn't call it as deep as fear. It's when you have a panic attack that you've got fear, but that's because we have delusions. It's natural. That's their nature. That's why our minds are always worried, always anxious, always thinking worried. We've got no control. Attachments chatting away, aversions chatting away, anxiety is chatting away, depression, always negative thoughts about ourselves, never happy, never satisfied. That's the fears of samsara. That's what Buddha means by what we call being neurotic, you know. So fear doesn't have its own status as an affliction, but it's the character, it's the nature of all afflictions, which is why when you realize emptiness, finally, there is no fear. That is insanity in our world. There's no such possibility of that. I always tell the story of Lama Zopa Rinpoche when he was a little boy. He was said to be a reincarnation of the previous Nyingma yogi up in the mountains, right? When he was a little boy, he's said to have died a great tantric yogi. He died with control, you know, then chooses his rebirth. As a little boy, he's very aware of who he is. He remembers who he is. He crawls up every day he's crawling up the mountain to the cave of the previous yogi. He's, you know, that is my home, he would say. When he played his games as a little boy, he would say all the benefactors are coming to the puja, his past life benefactors, all these types of things. So they check up on him. His mother goes to the local Nyingma Lama, Tulsing Rinpoche. That indicates he's the reincarnation of this previous Lama. Anyway, when he's about 8 years old, he tells a story about how he's up there in the mountains with his uncle in a monastery. And over on the other side of the river, he saw the Sherpas call white people, European people, yellow-eyed or white-eyed, some weird phrase they say, because, you know, yellow-eyed, white eyes and yellow hair or something. Anyway, he saw these white people across the other side of the river and he wanted to meet them. He would have been about 8. It would have been in 1952, okay? He hadn't seen these people before. And he wanted to meet them. So, of course, he crosses across the river on this kind of tree branch. It's not very deep, but very tumultuous water. So he went with a gift, his boiled potatoes, you know, he carried his gift and he fell in the water. And he's told this story, I heard it years ago. He said, the head, and we're talking about emptiness now, okay? The head came to the surface for air. That's a weird thing to say, isn't it? We'd say, I came to the surface for air. But already we know when you start to study, thinking about emptiness, all the different kind of reasonings and things we learn to, or even the way the Tibetans talk is very helpful. They say, anger thinks this, love is that. It's, you know, we go, I am angry. But there's anger there, there's love there, there's compassion there. So then when you learn about the I, and it looks like we're going to talk about emptiness now, whether we like it or not, you know, when you talk about where is the I, what is the I, ignorance, all this business, you learn to know the components of a person. So the components of a person are the body, the mind. So they're not the I. So you'd say the head. So clearly there he's 8 years old. He hasn't learned anything yet, but he's saying the head. He's observed to himself, the head came to surface for air, or it is an indication of something. Then he said he saw his manager freaking out, running on the bank, you know, he's losing this little tulku, right? And he can't swim. They don't teach him swimming there. So he goes down in the water, he comes up again, and then he said, I said to myself, the person known as the Laudo Lama, that's the name of the previous Nyingma Lama, he'd been recognized. The person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die, he said to himself rationally, while he's drowning, 8 years old. Then he said, and he said this when he told the story, I didn't know anything about emptiness, but there was no fear. Now, we hear that and we just think that's weird. Because as far as we're concerned, and we all know Mr. Darwin, I think one of those great big scientists from 100 years ago, whoever he was, Mr. Darwin, he came up with this observation. He came up with this observation that in the world, seeing all the animals and seeing humans kind of going crazy when things go bad, goodbye. They all say we have instinct for survival. We have that, but they talk like that, don't they? Instinct for survival. Do you understand? And they say that that's necessary in order to realize there's danger. So when someone comes along, like you're drowning, or you're nearly in a car accident, or the wild animals have an instinct for danger, so they all run away, They say we need that fear. They call that fear. And they all decide in the West that that's a valid state of mind and it's necessary in order to know there's a problem. Buddha says, don't be stupid. You need intelligence to know there's a problem. But what happens is because we have ego grasping, because we believe in an I that doesn't exist, and because attachment is the voice of the I that doesn't exist, because attachment exaggerates things and doesn't see reality, and then anger exaggerates things and doesn't see reality, and pride exaggerates your importance and doesn't see reality, then those states of mind are caught up in being liars. They're not in touch with reality. Therefore, their nature is fear all the time. So when something's going nicely, we don't notice the fear, isn't it? So when someone tries to punch you in the nose or you nearly get run over or you're drowning, suddenly the fear rises. And in our world, we say that's necessary. And then you know how to get out of danger. Now, there's Lama Zopa saying, 8 years old, he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness. Because the implication is when you've realized emptiness, you've cut the delusions. Therefore, there's no longer fear because you're no longer believing in nonsense. And that's hard for us to imagine. But he said there was no fear. So he remembers his mind. He went up for air. He didn't know how to swim, right? So he said the person known as Dalai was about to die. And there was no fear in his mind. This is fitting completely with the Buddha's view. So we have to deduce that he had in his mind, he already had no marigpa. He already had no delusion, no ego grasping. And that's why we have to assume, as indeed they said, in his past life he was a yogi, he died with control, he must have realized emptiness. So you never lose the realization of emptiness. You never lose that. You can't. You can't possibly ever lose that. Once you realize emptiness, the root, once you realize non-conceptual direct insight into emptiness, you've cut the root. You have more work to do. You cannot go back after that. So there he is, 8 years old, not knowing any of the teachings, but he's got in his mind an insight. Therefore, even though he's drowning, Zopa is dying. There's no fear. Now, we think if there's no fear, then he doesn't know there's a problem. So he just sink to the bottom of the river and go, oh, well, I'm drowning. What to do? Don't be stupid. He had common sense. He tried to go for air, but his mind would have been clear. That's hard for us to imagine. Are we communicating here? This is fitting with Buddhist logic. I'm looking forward to that. Having no fear. So what is that? When we have troubles and our kids suffering, we panic. Panic is ego grasping. Oh my God. And then attachment comes and you can't handle it. And then anger comes and then freak out. No wonder we all go crazy. Because we have compassion, but we can hardly even manage the compassion because the delusions are predominating. Anxiety and that's why we go crazy. That's why we kill ourselves and each other. Because we can't handle things because of attachment and aversion and anxiety and panic and the dramas, not because of compassion and not because of clarity. So when you have less delusions, you have more clarity, more wisdom, less neurosis, and therefore more compassion. This is logical. Are we accepting what I'm saying? Can we even see even a few years of our practice? We're a bit more, as a person said on there, a bit more equanimity, a bit more steady in the face of dramas. We manage them better because our attachment is less, our anger is less, our anxiety is less, and therefore our compassion can be more stable. I remember the pandemic. You hear about all these nurses, especially the nurses, or the medical helpers, killed themselves because they couldn't bear the pain. They couldn't bear the suffering. We can understand that, you know, because they're ordinary human beings. So seeing that constant people dying in the hospital, no matter how hard you try to help, you're exhausted from helping, and all they do is die. Of course, you take it upon yourself. You think you're hopeless, and you can't bear the pain. This is heartbreaking, you know. That's why I don't underestimate bodhicitta. I mean, it's high. That can only flourish when there's no delusions, you know, when you're less delusions. Then you have the courage to never give up. No matter how bad the suffering is, the bodhisattvas never give up. That's their key character. No matter how bad the suffering, no matter how nightmarish the suffering, here or there, you don't give up. That's high. That's advanced, people. Are we communicating? Are we communicating? So give ourselves a break, you know. Be humble with yourself. No, it's got a long way to go. But no, so why our compassion is not so strong. And okay, this is the other one. Clearly, His Holiness said, I loved it. He said, compassion, this is the point of this talk, compassion isn't enough. You've got to have wisdom. And wisdom, as we're talking, comes from lessening all the delusions. First of all, attachment and aversion and pride and jealousy and anger. And then finally, Chrissy, when you get to the sixth perfection, then finally the root delusion, you're ready for it now. All of that's the wisdom work. Because wisdom meaning, very simply, wisdom meaning just clarity, common sense. You see what's going on. When you're full of attachment, you can't see past your own nose, can you? You see just this divine person, hungry like a vampire, manipulating them. When you're attached to your child and you're attached to, and you're a lousy parent when you're attached to your child and you don't know how to have wisdom. They're naughty, they're wicked, they manipulate you, and you're just lazy and give in to them. You know, oh yes, darling, have a 15th piece of cake, you know, because you're too scared to say no to them because your attachment's so strong. So attachment is what makes a mess. Attachment is what makes a mess in your relationships. Because it's I-based, it's fear-based, and it blinds you from seeing reality, you know. And it limits your compassion. It limits your compassion. That's the point. You have to see this internally by our practice, you know. And this is all based on the analysis of the mind according to Lord Buddha and this over the centuries, all you know, the presentation of the mind that you learn in low rig. The bare bones that you learn in low rig, this is the basis of understanding this. And it's not the Western model, for sure. Quite different. So one step at a time, please. So your compassion if you leap into compassion, as His Holiness says, compassion is not enough, you need wisdom. You can only go so far. Like I started the very first point, even our compassion is limited simply because we only have compassion for a few people, the ones who are being harmed, the innocent victims. We don't have compassion for the happy people. We don't have compassion for the harmers. So we don't have compassion for most beings on the planet. Because our understanding of compassion is not clear, because we haven't learned the Four Noble Truths. That's the very basic level of why our compassion is limited. And then in our relationships, our compassion is limited for our child, for our husband, for our sister, because we have attachment and anger. I mean, your sister who's being mean to you, she's so mean, she shouts, she's rude to you. Of course she's hurting you. And because you have attachment, you get so upset and so angry, and you can't even see that she's causing herself suffering. So that's completely limiting your compassion. If it's your child, you can almost see that even when they're hitting you and screaming at you, you know they're suffering. But if it's your sister, since you're born, the whole history with each other, and she's mean to you and nasty to you, you can't see for 1 minute that she's suffering. Therefore, you can't have compassion because your attachment is so huge and your anger is so huge. It's obvious. That's why it's hard to have compassion for people who harm you. It's like a joke in the West to have compassion for people who harm you. Why would you, you know? Because you've got attachment and anger. So your compassion is limited. Are we communicating? I'm sure we are. So you've got to be wise as much as you can and deal with your life as much as you can. It's difficult, you know. And that's why also, like in the very first stages of practice, when there's no discussion of the mind yet, it's just control your body and control your speech. That whole level of practice is like playing safe, protecting yourself. So you know very well, if you've got attachment to alcohol, you know the first step is to stop drinking alcohol. So you remove alcohol out of your life. No one says to you that you must continue to drink alcohol and give up attachment to alcohol at the same time. It's impossible. The object is too strong. So if you are in a relationship with a husband and you fight continuously, which is not uncommon in the world, you live and you just keep going. You're like together. You're fighting. You're arguing. You're freaking out. It's impossible to live like this. But you just sit there. We just sit there until one day one of you kills the other one. I've heard the typical accepted thing in the West is that 40% of all women who get murdered on the planet are murdered by the person in the family, mostly the mother, mostly the father, mostly the husband, and maybe in some countries it's the father. It's usually the man who murders the mother, the wife. So 40% of all people on the planet who get murdered, this is so intense, are murdered by a person in the same family, which mostly means the husband. It's not against men. This is proving attachment and aversion. He can't handle his anger. He completely can't handle his anger. There's an ugly wife in front of his face every day who makes him completely crazy. So he kills her. And she's, I mean, you know what I'm saying? So, but we don't have enough common sense thinking, oh, I can't stand this anger, I'd better leave. No, you keep going back with drinking the alcohol, wondering why you can't give it up. Are we communicating here? Because of a stupid idea about marriage, you've got to sit together, and you have no money, so you've got to have one bedroom and one bed. I mean, I can't even imagine how you live like this. I'd rather go to prison than live like that. And I'm talking to ordinary people, and you know what I'm talking about. Who's the person you get mad at? Is your bloody husband and your bloody wife, isn't it? Because you're living too close. So please have at least 2 bedrooms, okay? I'm really serious. I get long thinking about it. And I'm sort of joking, but I'm not joking. You know what I'm saying. The person who makes us craziest is the person closest to us. So that's why to love your husband, to love your children without attachment is practically impossible until you're highly advanced. So you've got to protect yourself. Protect yourself. Protect yourself. Have a place where you can sit and do your practice, where you can close the door. I'm really serious, You've got to be intelligent about it. Protect your mind, You've got to protect your mind from problems. That's why the very first level of practice is that level. Control your body and control your speech. So you need a condition, an appropriate condition in which you can do that. So that's why, okay, this is why one of, in your relationships, one of the most profound practices, we don't even pay attention to it in the West. Forget controlling your mind. Forget looking at attachment. Is to control the speech. You might not be a rapist. You might not be a terrorist. You might not be a murderer, okay? But look at our speech. Look at our speech. But in our culture, we think, I can say what I like. We don't even think it's important. So therefore, if we never make it a practice, you'll never control your speech. And you wonder why you can't meditate. And you get so depressed about yourself because yet again, the words came out the mouth. But if you make a decision, in the morning, today, you make a powerful decision. I will not say one negative word. I think this is so profound. It's like a shock in the West to think this. But who do you think will benefit? And then at the end of the day, you do your 4 opponent powers and you regret the bad mouthing, you regret the vomiting out, rabbiting on about nothing, you regret the talking behind backs, criticizing your auntie and your uncle and your mother behind their backs, you regret the lying, and you regret the abusive speech, the 4. You regret those 4. You regret because you're sick of the suffering. You have compassion for those you've harmed. You do the practice and you vow for 24 hours. As Lama says, don't lie to yourself. You vow. Then you say at night, for tomorrow, for 24 hours, I will shut my mouth And then in the morning you remember, and don't be surprised that you'll do it. It works. It's like a miracle. And then 90% of your problems are solved. Then you have the space to work on your mind. So speech is a miraculous practice, but we never think it, you know. I think we'll do a meditation before I finish today. I love the practice of blessing the speech. I love this practice. I love this practice. Is where you say the Sanskrit, this seems a bit weird. You recite the Sanskrit alphabet. It sounds very hilarious, doesn't it? Because it said that Sanskrit is the purest sound. Of course, it's from Tantra, you know, but there's a sweet meditation. We'll do it. A sweet meditation where you visualize, it's so sweet, you visualize your tongue and the list is on top, and then you visualize light coming and purifying. It's a very sweet visualization practice, right? I think we'll do it together. Okay, but you need the page in front of you. Do we have the blessing the speech in the book? The prayer book? The prayer book, do we have it? Blessing the speech, do we have it? We'll do it before we finish tonight.
Yeah, a few copies, but not many.
Well, you don't have to sort of, we'll have it on the computer. We can see the words may be big. You can see if we can do it. Let me see. We'll do it. What time is it now? 2:30. We'll do it at 3:30. Okay. We'll do it in an hour. We'll do it in an hour. But let's talk more about the benefit. Can we hear the benefit? But you know, it never occurs. We say, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I want to meditate. But we wonder why we can't meditate. Because we're going crazy with all the angry thoughts. Well, after you had the fight, look how long that fight lasts in your head. He said this and she said that, and he said this and she said this. And it's almost impossible to imagine, isn't it, that you don't have fights in your family. It's almost impossible to think that you don't have fights with your sister, with your mother, with your grandma, with your grandpa. But it is possible, people. You're not being passive aggressive, but you're practicing. And it is a miracle. I promise you. It's possible, but you have to be conscious and decide it. And you start small, one day at a time. You won't succeed immediately, so you purify at the end of the day. You promise again the next morning. And you have to be, it won't happen overnight. It won't happen if you never say it. That's why, as Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish. I will close my mouth for 24 hours. That's a decision. And then you say that decision, you make the decision. And then the morning you say it, it guides you throughout the day. And I swear to you, if you know yourself, if you don't start opening the mouth, the problem might be still in your mind, but you don't grow it. All that the reverberation of that violent words, which we feel so much pain and guilt about. And once the words are out the mouth, we know you can't bring them back. It's too late, you know. And that's what destroys most relationships. And it builds beyond that to eventually violence, you know. I know you hear what I'm saying. It's a profound practice. I can't stress enough. It's the first level of practice, but we don't hear it. We don't notice. Oh, okay, control my body and speech. Yeah. You don't know what it means. Because we think, oh, I'm allowed to say what I like. And I think also part of the problem in our relationships, in the normal world in the West, we don't have methods for watching our mind. We don't have meditations. So we think that I'm in a relationship, and then all the way, and especially in Buddhist modern psychology, there's constant stress on sharing. We call it sharing. That it's right to say, if I'm upset with my husband, it is good for me to tell him why I'm upset. We don't say, maybe I just try and work on my mind. We think it's necessary to talk it through. But most of the talking through just comes a huge fight, because he thinks you're not listening to him, and you're not listening to him, so you have a nightmare, you know. It's like intense. So which doesn't mean it's not good to talk things through. You must. But the main energy of telling my husband how I feel is to let him know how I'm angry, and he did this, and he did this, and he did this, and he did this, you know. It's very hard to work on your mind first, but it's tremendously powerful. Do we have the practice or not? We'll do it later if we have it. We can manage, yeah? Even just have it on the screen big enough you can all see it. We'll see. Well, I'll just do a simple version, maybe. So you could almost say the purest way to sort out your problems in a relationship this is the best, but it's too weird for us, is if I have a husband and there's some problem, he doesn't do the dishes. I mean, I'm not talking anything worse than not doing the dishes. I hear that husbands don't do the dishes. Are we communicating here? You understand my point? The classic thing. And there's some vague agreement that you both do the dishes. But then, you know, I mean, just recently, two nice people I know, sweet, kind, both of them kind, good people, devoted Buddhists, you know, like quiet little people. And then, you know, talking to them, the problems, she gets annoyed because he's passive. He doesn't take initiative. He doesn't do the dishes. He doesn't check on things. So she's always taking the initiative and doing the dishes and cleaning the house and doing this and making the plans and organizing the schedules, you know. And he just kind of floats along. You understand me? So she's angry, upset, angry. Reasonable, I understand. And they're patient, sweet people I'm talking about, you know. So we discussed it. I said, well, you know, really, if we want to try to be practicing purely, you've got two options. There are two options. You do the dishes, accepting it, happily do the dishes, or you don't do the dishes and you leave them there 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and after maybe a week, he might notice, oh, perhaps I should do the dishes. Now, that's the best way to train him, isn't it? But who does that? Nobody. Got to tell him to do the dishes. I mean, this is something so simple, I can't believe it, you know. But look how hard that is. Just that, you know. So you work on your mind. And if you work on your mind and you solve the problem, then there is no longer a problem. And this is the truth, but we find it very hard to accept that. We think the problem is real. And by telling him to fix it, it'll go away. It's not easy, you know. It's really not easy. But this is ideal practice is sort it out, solve it in your mind, get rid of your own attachment. Because you see, attachment, and this is the point about attachment in a relationship, it's a control freak. Attachment is a control freak that wants to make the other person the way I want them. Do we not know that one? Do you understand me? It's a control freak. Whether it's your children or your husband, you want to make them the way you think they should be. And the fact is, you might be right. You might be right. But that's not the issue here. You know, and that's why most people go crazy in relationships. All your disappointed expectations, he doesn't do this and she doesn't do that. And, you know, it's all this disappointment. And disappointment is the result of attachment, expecting something. So to work on your mind in this simple way is tremendously hard. It's not easy, but this is what practice is. And then if you help yourself by controlling your speech, then that definitely helps you. It definitely helps you. And then I think to have space, have your own life and to have space, you know, physical space where you can do your own practice. I don't know. This is just, but how hard is most people are rich? You're not rich, are you? You haven't got your own spare bedroom? I remember reading an article in the New York Times about interviews with husbands and wives who decided they would have their own bedrooms, right? And they all said it was an absolute miracle in the relationship. Because first of all, you make the room the way you like it, but mainly even something as simple as living in the same bed, I don't want to be too personal, but, you know, one of them snores, or he smells, he grinds his teeth, and you just put up with each other all night. And almost one man said until his wife found a method to stop snoring, he practically wanted to kill her every night. But there they are in the same bed, every day, the same bed. I mean, what do you expect? So then they decide to have their own bedrooms. And suddenly, you know, first the husband feels offended. She doesn't love me anymore. But you've got mental space and physical space. And you have your own meditation cushion. You have your books the way you like it. You can have your pink cover. You can snore to your heart's content. And then you see each other freshly. Hello, darling. How are you? But already you wake up in the morning having a panic attack because you're so angry from the snoring. I mean, I'm really talking something so simple. But why we have this obsession with living in the same bed, I'm sorry, I just don't understand it. Maybe it's the mattress company fault, selling the big fat thing. I mean, I'm talking simplest things, but you know what I'm talking about. Oh, God. But in the monastery, they don't have their own rooms. All these little boys have to share beds, don't they? All your monasteries all have your own room. The little boys, the monks.
We do.
They have their own room? No. The little monks have their own room. They share rooms, don't they?
Yes.
Share beds. Even they share beds if you've got
Sure.
room.
Adults. Yeah.
Adults even.
Yeah.
Where are you from? Draper?
Therefore, yes.
Do you share rooms
Yes.
in the monks?
Yeah.
You didn't even share. So that was good practice. How many monks in one room?
Two,
Two.
three. Nowadays, when I grew up, like 5 and 6.
5 and 6.
Yes.
So you had to put up with each other snoring. So they're practicing every day, 5 or 6 husbands. So I suppose it's all practice, isn't it? Learning to put up with someone. But that's, yeah, anyway. But if you can have your own room, surely it's useful. Especially if you're living day and night with the same person, the same husband, dealing with the problems and the dramas and the kids and the money. It's just very intense, isn't it? And I'm just saying stupid things, but I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. I mean, when we were little, we were poor. My mother had 7 babies. And we didn't have enough beds, so we used to share beds. You know, we shared beds. We didn't have enough money. And I remember just because my sisters had asthma, two of my sisters had asthma, so they wheezing all night. And I'm an angry little volatile person, and I had to share the bed with Judy. I'd want to murder Judy. I'd put the pillow on her head because my poor little angry mind couldn't cope. So of course they all blamed Robina for being angry. It was true, but it was too much to bear for one little girl with her anger. Are you seeing my point? Living in the same bed as my sister with asthma, my poor sister, I don't wonder. I'm just talking here, but see the point I'm making. So if you can find this, the first level of practice, control your body and speech, protect yourself from danger, which means, but the trouble is you've got to have awareness of your mind, and mostly we're not aware of our mind, you know, we're not aware. So to have awareness of the type of person you are, and if you can get yourself the right situation to live your life with space, so you can do some practice every day, then you're protecting yourself, and therefore you're easier to live with, you know. But when you have a whole bunch of people who have no awareness of their minds all living together, no wonder people die, you know, in this crazy world we live in, you know. It's so painful. Just talking, okay, about how hard it is to. So again, back to the point, the simple point about the mind, talking about compassion. Our compassion is limited because we only have a small view of suffering, the suffering of suffering. And our compassion is limited because we have delusions. That's the clear point to see, you know. And that we don't suffer because of it, compassion. So you could argue those poor nurses who killed themselves during the pandemic. It's being very technical. It's not blaming anybody. It's just Buddhist analysis, you know. They had incredible compassion. This is the point. They had incredible compassion to want to help people. And they did spend their lives helping people. But the sickness was so bad, you couldn't heal everybody. So people died. So look at the analysis of why they suffered. First, they were exhausted. And then you see, when you've got attachment, if you're got compassion and you're helping someone, and then they get better, then you feel very happy, don't you? That means your attachment gets what it wants. Do you understand me? So you feel happy, you're successful. But if people don't get better, then you get exhausted because of attachment. Attachment craves for everything to be nice. You've got to understand that. Attachment craves everything to be nice. So if you're working in a hospital full of compassion, working and working and working, and they keep dying, your attachment is being assaulted every day, and aversion and or anger or despair or depression take over. That's why they kill themselves. Are you hearing that? This is very profound, really. We've got to remember that's why. So you don't suffer. We all think they suffered because of compassion. They suffered because they had a good heart. No, they suffer because they had attachment and aversion. Life is difficult, you know. That's why you suffer for your children. And if you have so much anxiety and so much fear and so much anger, your capacity to help is so limited, you know. All I'm doing is giving the analysis, and it's up to us to know how capable we are, know how along the path, you know. And that's why if we don't study the Buddhist view of the mind, you're not going to, I mean, I'm saying a few words here based on a little bit of remembering low rig and thinking about it. This is not the Western analysis. This is not Freud's analysis. But if you have the Buddha's analysis, then you can apply it. If you don't know this, how can you know why you're suffering? So it's so important to study the mind and then to use it as the basis for your practice internally, to think it through, think it through, think it through, think it through, see the attachment, see how it causes pain, see the anger, see these things and see how they cause you pain and that they are why you suffer. They are why you suffer. Yes, your husband should do the dishes. I agree. But that's not because you're not suffering because of that. You're suffering because you expect him to and you demand he does it and you're angry that he doesn't. That's why you're suffering. And that's why it's very hard. Hugely hard to really practice. Tremendously hard. So what I'm talking here is give yourself the right conditions. Give yourself space. Give yourself space, you know. Physical space, a place where you can practice, a place where you can meditate, give yourself, close the door from the family, you know. Because you have to know what you're capable of. Do a retreat sometimes. You've got to do this. It's like self-respect, you know. Have to, must. Anyway, any questions about all that? We can have it 2:40, 3 o'clock, 3:30, so 3. We have a cake and coffee break again soon. Are there any questions? Hello, Julie in Wales. Hello, Helene. Hello, everybody. Any questions, people? Sweethearts? Yes, go, Liz. Go, darling. Talk to me. Oh, turn on your thing. There's Liz, everybody. There's Liz on the right, on the left there. There's Liz. Talk, Liz.
Well, I was just wanted to say that if you have difficulty finding the blessing of the speech, I got it out of a green book, which was in fact the predecessor to the silver and gold books. It's part of the morning activities. We
Oh,
did
wonderful.
that. We did that in a retreat, mani retreat in Vajrayogini in 2009.
wonderful.
So
Okay.
I do that. I do that often. I love it.
Good. This is fantastic, Liz. So I think we found it here. We found it
right,
here,
okay.
Liz. So we'll do it, darling. We'll do it. So I'm going to, what I will do is just lead the visualization. And all you need to do is to read this, is to read the words, the syllables, the Sanskrit vowels and consonants. So we'll have that on the screen. So I'll lead the visualization and then you can recite the vowels and the consonants and then the dependent arising. We'll do that. So it's a good meditation, isn't it, Liz?
Very good.
That's right,
Very
darling.
useful every day in the morning, first thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a wonderful one. Any other questions before we do them? We'll have a tea break first, then we'll come back and do the meditation, okay? But not yet. More questions. Come on. Any more questions? Any more questions? Any more questions? Yes, sweetheart, back there. Go, darling. Lucy. Give her the mic, please. Here we are. Mic is coming. Yeah. Yes. Yes, sweetheart.
In terms of attachment,
Bit closer to the mic.
in terms of attachment with regards to grief,
Grief.
yeah,
Now, it's a really good question. Let's unpack it, okay? See, I think when you hear the word grief, do you know what people mean? Have you heard that word? Geshe-la? So what is there an equivalent word in Tibetan? Because I don't know. It doesn't come in low rig. I think it's a mixture of various things. Is there a word in Tibetan for that? Grief. How Western people talk about grief when someone dies.
Yep.
Is there a Tibetan word?
Yes.
There is.
Yeah, Dongwa.
Dong.
Dongwa. Yeah, Dongwa.
So the sadness people experience when someone
Yes.
dies.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to do my analysis of what I think grief is, and maybe Geshe-la can tell me I'm wrong. Okay, so listen. Sit down, relax. Okay, so what's happening is your beloved dies, right? Somebody you love dies, is that correct?
Yeah.
Like your pussycat or your mummy or your husband or something, yeah?
yeah,
Or your baby, somebody you love. Also, someone you're attached to. Would you agree with that?
yes,
I mean, you have grief. So I've got a feeling if you're an ordinary sentient being, not a bodhisattva, It means the mixture of some virtues and some delusions. So the key one would be attachment, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Attachment, meaning you've got a strong connection with this person. You do love them. You do have compassion. You see their good qualities. But the pain, I think, that most people experience initially is from the attachment, because there's nothing more painful. I mean, one person I know, one of my sisters, who's been married for 60 years, got 7 kids, grandchildren, lived their lives together. And her husband died 3 years ago. And she still says, the pain is the worst pain I have ever known. So that was an analysis. That would be because of attachment.
Yeah.
That will be because of attachment. Because losing the object of attachment is like the worst pain possible. That person who's no longer there, just the simple agony of they're gone. That has to be because of attachment. But don't put yourself down. That's normal. We're human. Do you see? And so I think, then of course there's remembering they've got good qualities. Do you remember that? So I remember His Holiness when his mother died. He'd mention it and then tears would come. But you could argue with His Holiness, he couldn't have attachment. But he still cried because he remembered his mother's qualities and he was sad that she wasn't there. But you would argue he wasn't suffering because of attachment. So for us, I think if that suffering continues and continues, is because of terrible attachment, and you can't accept that they're gone, and you think about them the whole time, and so your heart is always broken. So I would suggest that grief, if it lasts and lasts and lasts, it's because of attachment. Do you see that? Can you hear that? But it's normal human. But if you have the Buddhist view, and you have the view of impermanence, and you understand death, then you can focus a lot, even for your dog, you can focus on how to help your dog after they've died. You have prayers and practices, you do medicine Buddha, then at least you're doing something productive to help them, not just missing their presence. So that makes you more happy, and it's more compassion, and that can help you heal the grief, I would suggest. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, this person I'm talking about, who's this husband who died 60 years together, just the pain, all unbearable pain for 3 years. All I want to do is see his body again. All I want to do is hold his hand again. The pain is unbearable, the loss of that object, that person, That has to be mostly attachment, I would say, the pain of that. Now, is that what you mean by grief? The same kind of thing. Yeah, there you go. So I think it's depending on the person.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
What, darling?
That makes a lot of sense.
That makes sense. Yeah, so that's why it's so important to have the view that the person's consciousness. So I know recently when my sister died, then when my mother died, I mean, I wasn't so attached to my family. I'm not so attached to my sisters and my mother. I love my mother. When she died, she was with my sister in Australia, and I was in England, and my sister rang me first, and because it was midnight. I remember this. This is 40 years ago. And she rang all the other sisters in Melbourne. She's in another city. And she rang me, Mummy just died. What'll I do? She's not a Buddhist. And so I said, say Om Mani Padme Hum in her ear. She said, Om what? And she wrote it down, Om Mani Padme Hum, and shouted Om Mani Padme Hum in my mother's ear, And all I was thinking about was how to pray for her. And then Lama Yeshe has just arrived in Chen Raising Institute, 100 miles up the road from my sister. So I rang Lama. I said, please pray for my mother. And I was so happy I could do that for my mother. But if I have no view of that, all I can think of is the loss of my mother, my poor mother, and I'm obsessed with it, But I was able to help her mind, and I was so happy. She heard Om Mani Padme Hum. I was so happy that Lama Yeshe could help her mind continue on. That helps our mind a lot, give up the grief, I think. If you don't have that, this other person I'm talking about, all they think of is this body. And the pain of not having, must be so awful. It's natural. We're human. Do you understand?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, darling. Yeah, but His Holiness, I remember he talked and was sad, but within 3 minutes he's cracking jokes again, You understand me? Because his little heart hasn't been broken into pieces, which is what happens when you have grief, Like you can't. And the other thing, I think, one more thing, when people have all this grief, especially for a lost husband or child, you feel you have to keep having grief. You're too scared to give up the attachment because you think it sounds cruel, that you don't care anymore. And I've heard in many relationships between mothers and fathers, when their baby dies, it splits up the relationship because they're both full of their own grief It's so personal, and they can't, it's almost like, anyway, I don't know about that. Doesn't matter about that. But you almost feel like you have to keep being guilty. You have to keep being sad. You have to keep being grief-stricken, because it feels like you're giving up the person if you stop feeling sad, you know? I'm just thinking that aspect of it. What?
I have a friend that's gone through that, they feel guilty.
She's what?
She's gone through grief,
With grief, yes.
and she feels guilty
To stop having it. That's right.
Yeah.
No, about what she did bad, you mean?
about not feeling as
There you go, not feeling so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we feel we have to keep being sad. That's right, exactly. That's right. That's right, exactly. Yes, darling.
Is there a danger that we can turn our practice into another object of our attachment? In other words, can you become too attached to
I understand exactly. Okay. Attachment in general is a faulty state of mind because it exaggerates the good qualities of something. So I don't think I've ever met a person who's attached to their practice, because if they were attached to their practice, it wouldn't last, because attachment exaggerates. It would eventually become aversion and you'd give it up, because attachment's not sustainable. So some people, if they have good experiences by doing their practice, well, honey child, I'm very happy you're attached to it, go for it. But if it's also attached to being, oh, I'm an important practitioner, and then you're doing your meditation and you say, excuse me, you children, be quiet, I'm practicing. That's not attachment to your practice. That's attachment to some idea of yourself being a practitioner. So that won't last either. Do you understand me? So don't be scared. I mean, this is why, really, as Rinpoche says, even forget about the tantric path where you can transform delusions on the path. He says you can even start doing that on the Mahayana path. So if you have attachment to your practice, meaning you love to go to your cushion, I would not even call that attachment. But you know, you can transform your attachment. You can think, okay, at least you like sitting in your cushion, you like your altar. I mean, that could be attachment, but be happy with it. How amazing, you know? Don't worry, I would suggest, but I don't know anybody who's attached to their practice until they're highly evolved and they get bliss, you know? I mean, someone like Lama Rinpoche, if he wasn't talking, he's in meditation, because he has bliss. Then there's no effort, you know? Someone else, people, questions? But attachment, you see, you've got to start this first level. And in the middle scope, it doesn't go on about attachment to more subtle things. It just goes into attachment to the objects of the senses. That's the first level. At least control that level, and then you gradually get more subtle, more subtle, more subtle. And then, of course, it gets to the eight worldly dharmas. When I first heard about the 8 worldly dharmas, I thought, what's this dumb phrase? What are they talking about? You know. But basically, okay, let's talk about that now. Oh, yeah, that's what I said before. I'd go into that. That's the 7th verse of the 8 verses, or maybe the 8th verse. Can't remember. But basically, you know, attachment is subtle and pervasive. And it finally doesn't go at a very subtle level until you realize emptiness. I would suggest that. It has to be. It has to be finally the dregs of attachment at the subtlest level have gone when you realize emptiness. It's no longer dualism, you know, you'd say that. So it goes to very subtle levels, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. And you can't see those until you see them, because you've got to start at the gross level. But when they get to the bodhisattva path, that's when they talk about these more subtle levels, more pervasive way of describing attachment. And that's all the 8 worldly dharmas is. It's 8 different ways, or 4 pairs of describing the suffering of attachment. But it's in a slightly different way, you know? So typically in the middle scope, you've got attachment to the cake, the belief the cake will bring you happiness. You keep eating the cake until eventually it's disgusting. So it turns into aversion, doesn't it? So you have attachment and aversion. And aversion or anger is a response when attachment stops getting what it wants. Something like that. And you go between these two. That's how they talk, isn't it? Now, in the 8 worldly dharmas, everything is framed in terms of attachment. So there's 4 pairs, isn't it? So it's sort of like the first two are sort of like attachment is like an assumption that you must have happy feelings all the time, attached to happy feelings. And then as soon as an unhappy feeling comes, as soon as you stub your toe and pain comes, attachment continues, but it shifts its object. Before, it was attachment to happy feelings. Now it's attachment to being free of unhappy feelings. So attachment, it's a way of describing attachment as continuously there. Can you hear that? It's another way of saying it. So then the second lot is attachment to getting things. And then when you stop, when you don't get things, it's attachment to being free of not getting things. So the one on the first one, go back to the first one, the feelings. So, you know, I'm down in my room down there, and downstairs we know it's warm, isn't it? It's cozy down there. And as soon as you hit the stairs, it becomes cold, doesn't it? Do you understand me? So if you know, and if you're sensitive to the different changes in the weather, so downstairs attachment is getting comfort. Attachment is getting it triggers a good feeling. The good feeling is coming, and you're attached to it. And then suddenly you hit the cold air, and straight away attachment shifts. Oh, I wish I could be free of cold, isn't it? So it never ends. Attachment's always there, every second of the day. The second one is about getting things. The third and the fourth ones, they're the killer, you know. Attachment to hearing nice sounds with our name in them. It's called praise. We don't think we're craving to hear nice sounds with our name. We don't think we are, but you look what happens when you hear criticism. The pain is unbearable, isn't it? And immediately you're panicking. And now attachment is craving and manipulating to get to hear nice words with your name in, to hear praise, to stop, to be free of hearing criticism. We mightn't think that's a thing, but you look at it, you know. It's like you're in a conversation with somebody and they're praising you. You're eating it up like so delicious, it's so delicious. And then suddenly the conversation gets stopped because someone else comes along. You're so disappointed because you want to hear more praise. And they start talking about the weather, you know. What about me? Do you understand me? Because I didn't finish the conversation. You're dying to hear more. But to hear the criticism, it is like being stabbed. It's painful. So all you want to do is be free of that, you know. We understand. And the last two, I think these are last to go. This one I think is the last attachment to go. They call it attachment to reputation, which sort of sounds like, oh, I don't care what people think about me. Don't be ridiculous. Since we're born, attachment, this emotional hunger, this craving to be validated by the person in front of you. This is not just praise. This is needing the person in front of you to see you and hear you and acknowledge you. Are you hearing that one? And if that's why, in other words, it's almost like this attachment makes us feel that I'm not a real person until someone says I'm a nice person. I don't mean praise. I mean validating you. That's why I think in our world, if we're very quiet people, we're very scared to even say what we want, know what we want, and then go and do it. Because we're afraid of what mummy says, of what daddy says, of what God says. We're afraid of upsetting people. It's terrified of being not being approved of. It's very hard to see this one, but it's there all the time. And we're in our head all the time, having conversations, telling people how we think, telling people how we feel. And one of our worst sufferings, we call it loneliness. To think of that. Loneliness is you've got all these thoughts, all these ideas, what you'd like to do, and you like cooking, and you like cleaning, you like going to work, you like going shopping, you like going to tennis, but you have no one to talk to, no one to share your feelings with, they say. That's how it is. So therefore, you feel you're not a worthy person because there's no one saying to you, oh, really, Robina, what a wonderful thing to do. I'm so happy for you have playing tennis, you know. So in other words, we're not a valid person until someone else says it. Do you hear this, people? Do we hear this? Loneliness. So you got to ask yourself the question, why is it all my thoughts are not valid until someone else hears them? And we have that craving. We just, if we don't have someone to tell people to, if we don't have someone to talk to, we don't think, we think we're a nothing person, you know? You know, you're driving the car home from work and something weird happens, some accident. You look in your mind, already you're telling your husband at home. You're saying the story and you're telling a person. Are we hearing that? Can you hear that? Can you hear that? So we feel unless we tell another person what we think, if we explain our experiences, if we explain our ideas, if we share what we like with another person, if we don't do that, we're not a real person. So therefore, that's what we mean by lonely. And that's why most people die of loneliness, because they don't know how to have their own thoughts, don't know how to be content with their own activity and be fulfilled in themselves. Am I right? What do you think? Does that sound real? So in other words, attachment to reputation is something as simple as attachment to being liked. You think of what success means. In our world, you are successful if other people say you are good. Do you see my point? You can be the best musician on the planet, but you are feeling despair if people don't praise you, if people don't acknowledge you as the best musician. So the very nature of our deluded minds, the very nature of our dualistic being of a body of attachment is this, you know. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be kind to each other. You can see it with some children. You can see it with human beings. Some people are all their lives feel that they never got enough praise and love from their mother. They always say their mother didn't see them, the mother didn't hear them, the mother didn't acknowledge them, and they feel this terrible sense of loss. So they think they're suffering because their mother didn't give them enough love. They are suffering because their attachment to being seen and heard never got satisfied. It's their attachment that is the cause of the problem. You know, this is very hard to see. Are we communicating? This is more powerful attachment than attachment to sex and drugs, you know. It's so subtle. It's there all the time, all the time. They say, I can always quote this, isn't it? The yogis in the mountains who've given up sex and drugs and rock and roll, but they're still thinking about what the people in the village are thinking about them. It's like a symptom of having a dualistic mind. You can't help it, you know. It's until you realize emptiness, you kind of heal that dualism. You know, that's where attachment eventually goes. You think about that. It's the natural potential, it's the natural state of a dualistic person, which is what Buddha means by samsara. So there's levels of attachment, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. Start with the grossest level, control the body and speech, get less, and then start to the ever subtle levels, you know, then working on these more subtle ones. And that's the method to get happy. Then when you don't have attachment to reputation, you'll have so many people loving you, you won't keep them off you, I promise, because you're such fun to be around. But we all know when there's a really needy person, always wanting to be loved and seen, you can't stand people like that because they're always miserable. And in a relationship, you can really see it. No matter how much you think your husband doesn't love you enough, and he keeps saying, I love you, but you still don't believe it. You see the pain of some relationships because he or she is so feeling unloved. No matter what the other person does, it's never enough. It's never enough. This is nightmare, you know. And you always believe it there's a mother who's the fault, your father's the fault, your husband's the fault, you know. So the key one of attachment is never enough. Never enough, that's it. Never enough. And this is the point that's shocking, the Buddha says, Lama says, the happy feelings that come from getting what attachment wants can never grow. Never grow. Satisfaction has to come mentally. As Lama Yeshe says, we have to practice being content. That sounds very hilarious. You have to practice thinking, I'm enough, I'm doing enough, good enough, okay, I'm fine. You got to practice it. You have to practice it, and eventually you start to believe it, you know. Instead of thinking, it'll come if I get a better job. It'll come if I get thin. If it comes if I change my nose. It'll come if I get a new husband. It comes if I get a new job. No, it won't. It never will. It looks like it, but it's the worst lie. Don't be seduced by that. It comes from becoming content right now. Right now, I'm okay. I'm enough right now. And then you get better and better and better. And you learn from the inside to become happy, have happy feelings, you know, and then become content. This is Buddha's view, okay? Buddha's method. You have attachment. Wicked. Attachment is wicked, okay? But when you understand it properly, if you don't understand it properly, you'll throw the baby out with the bathwater. You chuck out love and kindness and everything else. It's so wicked. You have to know what it means and what's the distinction between attachment and virtue, attachment and contentment, attachment and happiness, attachment and love. Have to know the difference. Okay. 3. Okay, let's have coffee and cake break and come back at 3:30 and we'll do this blessing the speech meditation, okay? Okay?